So just to recap, since we are recording, I'll give it just a couple of minutes while our other panelists hop on and for other attendees to join us. Hey, Mike and Veethika, we're going to give it just maybe another minute. Looks like Nick is here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we are right on the hour, and I want to be sure we've got time for everyone to ask questions. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the call. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to get a chance to hear your questions and share a bit about what it's like to be a product designer here at GitLab. For those that aren't familiar with GitLab, which I know that a couple of my students that are here in the call have heard a lot about it, but for those that might not be familiar with it, we are known as a complete open source DevOps platform delivered in a single application. Our primary users are teams that are working within development, security, and ops departments. So I like to say that we build software for people who build software. That's not an official slogan, by the way, but our UX team consists of about 44 folks, including product designers, UX researchers, managers. We also have one of our amazing UX writers that looks like on the call, which I'm happy to see him join as well. And we are located all over the world. So we've got people everywhere, which is a wonderful thing. It's great to get to see people from all over the place. So we are a fully remote organization as well, and we strive to be asynchronous first in our communication. This lines up with our values of being inclusive, ensuring that everyone gets to contribute to a conversation, and it's also very helpful for understanding and tracking the history of our decisions. So this means that we attempt to capture everything in some way, whether that's through collaborating in our product, using issues, recording meetings and chats in Zoom, or documenting discussion details in meeting agendas. So that being said, in true GitLab fashion, I have created a Google Doc with an agenda that outlines the structure for our chat today. This document is editable by everyone, and I'm going to put it right here in the Zoom chat. Please let me know if you do have any problems being able to access that, but it should be editable by everyone so that you can add your questions in. It'll also show the outline for the discussion. There's a section down at the very bottom in purple with some sample question 1, question 2 slots. So feel free to type your questions in there, and at the end of the conversation, I will open it up for questions at that time. So again, I'm Holly Reynolds, Senior Product Designer here at GitLab on the Plan team. And I'm going to just take a quick minute to ask my panelists, coworkers here to just quickly give your name and your title and maybe where you're located. And I'll just call you out one by one. So Austin, if you would, go ahead and share.
Yeah, I'm Austin Regnery. I'm a product designer at GitLab. I live in Charleston, South Carolina.
Thank you so much. Nick, if you would go next.
Hi, my name is Nick Post. I'm based in Bristol in the UK, and I work in the Manage Optimize team, so the same group as Austin.
Thank you so much. Veethika.
Hi, I'm Veethika, and I am a senior product designer working at GitLab with the Verify continuous integration team, and I am based out of Bangalore, India.
Thank you so much. Iain.
I'm Iain Camacho. I'm a senior product designer at GitLab for the package stage, and I'm in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
Thank you so much. And Mike, last but not least.
Hi, Mike Nichols, senior product designer. I work on the source code group, and I am based in Orlando, Florida.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So this graphic just provides a simple overview of the DevOps process, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here because there's a lot to know. You can see in the agenda that I've added some links in the event that you want to kind of dig a little deeper into that, but I want to be sure that there's plenty of time for questions and for the discussion. So from a product and team perspective, each segment could represent a collection of features within GitLab that help to serve a specific set of workflows for a user. And as you can see, each of us is assigned to a separate portion of this process, which means that we aren't always working on the same features together, but we are working on the same product together. So there's often an opportunity for overlap in our work, which means we have to be collaborating frequently and be proactive in finding those opportunities. So now that I've given you just a bit of background on GitLab and our team, I would like to shift focus to our panelists with a few questions I've heard from students previously. Again, I'll set aside some time for additional questions at the end. So if you would make notes of those in the document, or you can just hang on to those questions until we get to that point. Panelists, if you could keep your responses to maybe 1 to 2 minutes max, that would be great, just so we've got plenty of time for everyone. So let's start with Austin. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. Austin, what would you say is a typical day for you as a product designer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody will say this, your days vary, but generally speaking, when I wake up, I try and give myself something a little bit easier to get my day started. So I'm digging through mentions through GitLab. Sometimes I'm triaging that through my Gmail, or sometimes it's actually in GitLab itself. I'm responding to questions that may have come up asynchronously from colleagues in other countries, or even ones that are close by. And then I usually like to look ahead of the meetings that I have for the day, which usually is like maybe between like 1 and 4. Similar to how we have an agenda in this meeting, I want to go in and view if there's like a slide deck I need to review or any content that I want to talk about, just to make sure that I'm prepared for those meetings. Once I have that out of the way, I usually have a few design opportunities that I'm focused on for a given quarter or a milestone that we're working in. So then I'll usually work on those items by either creating specific wireframes or mockups, or begin research efforts. It all kind of depends on what's the priority for that section of time. And then usually I try and squeeze in a coffee chat or so, which is just meeting up with another teammate virtually just to casually catch up, talk about things. Could be work related, could be personal. Living in a all remote environment means you don't normally get those interactions day to day. So that's definitely a priority when it comes to my days.
Thank you so much. And same question for Iain, please.
So it's going to sound very similar to Austin, which is exciting to have some consistency. But I like to start my day also looking at those to-dos, which is anytime someone's assigned something to me or mentioned me or anything like that. Most of my team is in the States, so they're ahead of me. So I like to respond to everything they did in their afternoon, first thing in the morning. Then I usually get a couple of hours, and this is where I devote my time to my work. So this is either doing design work, doing research, if I'm working on some strategy, putting stuff together, anything like that. Usually around the middle of the afternoon, I block off some time to review all of my upcoming meetings. And then I usually spend the end of my day, maybe the last 2 hours or so, in meetings, synchronizing with the rest of my team, or I'm actually on a couple of different teams right now, so synchronizing with all those people during that chunk. And I just kind of repeat that every day.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Mike?
Sure. So again, I think you're going to start hearing some themes here, but I'm kind of lucky that all of my meetings tend to be in the morning. It's amazing to hear how like some folks, just based on geographic regions, sometimes that stacks at the end of the day, and sometimes that stacks at the beginning of the day. But for me, it's in the morning. So yeah, first thing in the morning, check asynchronous communications. I usually go Slack first because I figure if it's in Slack, it's the most important. Then I usually go through emails. That usually gives me an idea of what's happened today. So the beauty of async communication is there's no pressure to do stuff like right away at that moment. But the flip side of that is sometimes you're waiting on other folks. So I like to see what's progressed, what's coming up. That'll let me know what's going on. Usually sit through my meetings, and then based on what has popped up in those emails and Slack messages, I'll start digging into stuff. And like others mentioned, sometimes that's doing some product design. Sometimes that's just digging through the product and researching and seeing how this feature works, and a lot of testing and a lot of things like that. So yeah, it's better for me.
Thank you so much. Nick, if you would go next, please.
Yeah, so as someone in Europe, I prefer having my meetings at the end of the day, which is lucky because most of my meetings are with the team in the US. So that means I have the morning to have some focused deep work where I can sort of concentrate my time on some of my biggest sort of design tasks, things that I just sort of need some uninterrupted time on. This is one of the biggest benefits I've found from being a designer in asynchronous work is you're able to carve out a lot more time for deep work and deep thinking, which I really appreciate as a designer. That really helps rather than being disrupted all the time when you're in the middle of like some thinking. Apart from that, I have meetings like everyone else, but on a day-to-day basis, I try and bring in a little bit of time to think about a certain feature that I'm working on. I try and dedicate a little bit of thinking time to our broader design system and some of the components or the way that we structure it as a broader team. And I also like to dedicate some more of my time to like the culture of GitLab as well. So thinking about what are some of the processes that we have, how can I share some knowledge with people, how can I learn from other people and sort of interact with people, interact and create more of like a studio type environment.
Thank you so much, Nick. And Veethika.
All right, so it's going to sound very template-like because I also start my day very light, but the difference is because I am kind of situated in the right extreme of the spectrum if we talk about the time zones. So when it's my morning, most of my colleagues, they're not available. So I use that time, of course, for the lighter work, such as like reading articles, blogs, and checking my messages, responding to the issues where I'm tired, anything that could be done with a coffee mug in my hand. Then as the day proceeds, I start working on things that demand my undivided attention. And as I'm ending my day, that's when my meetings start, of course. And when I use the meetings, so I mostly use the meetings for discussions and reviews on things that I've worked on for the rest, for the first half of the day. That's how it pans out for me. It's only the time zone aspect that changes so much in our day-to-day like activity.
Thank you so much. So just going to go through the same process again, but with a new question here. The reason I like to ask this question is because I do know that we have a lot of students on the call and we have a lot of folks who are going to be hopefully entering the design workforce soon. And I know all of the senior designers and other designers here on the call know that this is a common question when you're interviewing. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this particular question. So starting with Austin, if you would share your design process.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say it's what we have outlined in our handbook. At least at we work at GitLab, we all try and work through our handbook and meet those same strategies. Generally speaking, though, it's essentially trying to take whatever idea has been proposed and being able to help bring vision to that, whether that's visually or through some other means, and then validating that that idea is useful and valuable to our customers or proposed user base. And then once we feel confident in that, it moves into our build track. So that might mean that I'm building low fidelity wireframes to help conceptualize the layout of a page. That could mean going and digging into metrics to understand how are we actually using this feature today to figure out if it needs to be changed. Sometimes things are just as simple as referring to our pajamas design system and verifying that, yeah, we should add a badge counter here and that can work according to the pattern we've established. There is no like, this is what we always do. You might even notice like in our handbook, like the design one is maybe the most dense because there's just so many ways that we will manifest the design portion of validating an idea.
Thank you so much, Austin. My internet froze for just a hot second there when you were talking, so I didn't get everything captured in your response, but it is in the handbook there, so thank you for doing a great job of articulating what's there. Iain, if you would answer the same question.
For sure. Very similar to Austin. I'm gonna say the handbook kind of shows everything that we do in terms of how we work and things like that. So that's a great resource if you want to investigate that. If I wanted to give it kind of a high level overview, I would say that my design process is broken up into 3 pieces. The first piece is devoted to exploration and understanding. So this is when I like to do problem validation or discovery research and talk to users so I can understand what it's like for them to have this problem. I like to partner with the product manager or other stakeholders involved in whatever it is to understand what value is the business going to get out of it, what are they hoping to achieve in the long term versus right now, and really get a broad understanding of what is going on here. I take all of those learnings and a new sense of empathy that I've gathered from talking with those users and move into that second phase, the actual design phase. It's my favorite phase because it's this magical little moment where you understand a problem and then you can just create a plan for a solution. And it's the favorite thing that I love to do over and over again. Once I've created a design, whether that is a visual mockup or a prototype, a little HTML, CSS change to make a minor adaptation, or even just a layout conversation discussion of what we want to do, produce that. Then I'll move into the third phase, which is that solution validation phase, which is when we actually say to our users, we think you have a problem or something that could be better or something you want us to invest in. We want to build this. Try using it. Now tell us, did it actually make it better? And assuming we get a good yes, that's awesome, we move forward. The more realistic answer is yes, but, which is most of it's good. We need to make some adjustments. Or the third one is totally possible, which is didn't quite hit the mark, we should do it again. This is where iteration becomes really powerful. And then at the very end, I like to put it together. Here's my plan. Here's the designer why it's important. Here's what our customers thought about it. All right, engineering team, I'm now your colleague and partner in building this. Let's do it together.
Thank you so much, Ian. Mike, same question to you, please.
Yeah, so I like to spend most of my time in the first phase of Ian's 3 phases there. To me, problem investigation is where it's at. So it's interesting, we talk about design so much and I think a lot of times we focus on that. But in what I've found in my career and in life in general, just the better you can understand a problem, the better you have a chance of solving it. And there's a tendency to jump right to that solving part. But I like to spend as much time as I can understanding the problem from every angle, you know, doing user research, but is a huge part of that, but also just going into the product. We have a very complex product. So to even get started on something, a lot of times you have to go in and understand it, read some documentation, do some testing, try some things out. Sometimes that requires setting up environments and test projects and things like that. But if you take the time to do that, I think it really sets you up to, you can't solve a problem that you don't understand is basically what I'm trying to say. So number one, dig into that problem. And then there's that is the happy phase, like Ian says, right? Once you get that understanding, there is that fun little moment where you get to do that design work that I think we all hold very high. But that is a very fleeting thing. A lot of times you spend a little bit of time there, do that, and then it comes the next phase of like, okay, this is what we want, but what can we actually build? So then it's a lot of times breaking it down with your product managers and the engineers and things like that, and comparing what the ideal end goal state would be versus what we can do in a realistic manner, and then formulating a plan how to get from point A to point B.
Thank you so much. Nick, same question, please.
I'm just going to copy and paste everyone else's answer into the chat. But yeah, as everyone said, I completely agree with what everyone said. I like to, as a designer who's not particularly great at UI and likes to bring in as many ideas as possible, I like to sort of act a little bit more like a facilitator within my design process. So within the problem space, within solution space, using my design skills to make it clear, play back what is the problem and try and create some frameworks or ways of explaining more clearly what the problem is so people can contribute to that. And again, sort of iterating and playing back that. And doing the same in the solution space as well, of thinking what are the potential solutions, posing what the problem is to people, collecting feedback, and using that overall to sort of shape and move the solution forward. So my design process is like everyone else's, but also I try and include as many other people in my team as possible, and that includes not just designers, that includes engineers, that includes product managers, people from other stage groups and teams, to try and bring all those good ideas together and not just rely solely on my own thought process.
Thank you so much, Nick. And just a quick note to everybody on the call. I know that I recap this a lot in class, but as you can see, collaboration is such an important part of UX. I mean, it's something that your hiring managers are going to be asking about. So again, you can see talking with others on your teams, with stakeholders, with users, that's all a huge part of UX. Veethika, same question, please.
Sure. So I have put a link in the document, which is for a handbook page that I maintain along with my product manager. We actually worked like pretty hard to come up with a process for our particular group, keeping in mind everything that existed since before, like the rituals that we used to follow since before, and the product development workflow that is defined in the handbook for the whole of GitLab. And that's where the exact steps are documented. But apart from that, I would also like to talk about how the process has evolved since I started working for GitLab. So it has evolved in a way that this is a domain which is very technically complex. So, which is the reason that instead of including stakeholders at a later stage, I now keep them involved since the very beginning of the entire process. I start off with making sure that I've broken down the complexity of the topic into consumable bits to base my foundation upon. And I do that by asking a lot of questions. So I might sound stupid at times to them, but I don't care about that. I ask a lot of stupid questions. I'm kind of popular for that, maybe. And then as soon as I put up the very first draft of the design on the issue, I broadcast it on the messaging platforms, on the issues, like I tag everyone so that there's enough visibility for everyone to look at it at a very early stage. So the direction that I take from there on is something that we all agree upon, or if not agree upon, at least that something that's right for the product. That's all.
Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to the last question, and then I'll open it up for questions from the group. So what tools and technologies do you find essential for product designers? I didn't specifically say here at GitLab only because I know that we're kind of all working on the same tools. But if there are any additional tools that you personally find valuable or have found valuable in the past, I would love to hear about those as well. And this would start with Austin again, please. Looks like you've already noted it in the document, but if you would just articulate that.
Yeah, I try to generalize it a little bit. Having a good software support your design process, that can be whatever works well for you. If you know Sketch, Figma, InVision, Adobe XD, any of them, you can switch between them for the most part. And then being able to jump into user research software has also been helpful for synthesizing results and like using whiteboarding tools like Mural or whatever your team might be using at the time. Project management software is also very important because everybody is going to be using some sort of project management software. That might be Jira, that might be GitLab. Hopefully it's GitLab. But then the other ones that are kind of random that I thought are a little bit more niche, but very helpful to me is being able to use a developer console a bit to dig through elements and manipulate them. So like when you right click in the browser, hit inspect element, you can change things. That's helpful for just kind of sometimes quickly mocking something up or better understanding if this is a bug or something's going on. And Markdown has been pretty huge, at least lately for me. Everything that I write ends up being in Markdown, which isn't like a crazy syntax or anything, but it does seem to become like the universal way of formatting text in the web. So whether that's you're using Slack or if you're using GitLab or any of these other tools, you'll see Markdown used a lot, and that helps you better communicate your ideas.
Thank you so much, Austin. Iain, same question, please.
So everything Austin just said is a great place to start. Two things that I would kind of add to it that I've discovered recently that have really helped. One is a tool called Loom. It allows you to record your screen and yourself talking. It posts it up into the cloud and gives you a nice little link. It is amazing to be able to just take 2 minutes, walk through a design, talking through what you're thinking, and then share that with your engineering team or whoever is involved with the design, or if it's just images. That little walkthrough has saved so much time in terms of communicating and avoiding confusion. It's even helped me review the design out loud, and I've had several moments of like, oh, now that I say it out loud, that doesn't work. So that little tool has actually really helped me revise my own design to communicate more effectively with my team. Just kind of the biggest challenge, I think, as a designer is to be a really good communicator.
And Loom doesn't hit you with the password prompt like like I've discovered recently when sharing some of my recordings with others. So thank you so much, Iain. You had mentioned, I think you said 2 or no?
I can come up with another one. I might have committed to 2.
Maybe I just misheard you. No, it's okay.
No, I can come up with a second one. Let's see, challenge accepted. I think the next tool that I would really pay attention to is how you organize yourself. So a self-to-do list manager. When you're a designer, you spend a lot of time communicating with a lot of different people, and they share a lot of information. A lot of it's really helpful, and there's a lot of noise. And being able to differentiate that and turn them into action items and keep them organized is incredibly crucial.
That's a really great point as well. Thank you so much, Iain. Mike, same question, please.
I got nervous because I thought when Iain was talking about organization, I thought he was about to steal mine. But I would just say, regardless of whatever tool you use, whether it's Sketch, Figma, InDesign, Photoshop, whatever, organization is a huge key to that. Whether you're going full on design system or if it's a smaller project that doesn't require all that, how you organize your assets within that tool is almost just as important as that tool itself. So I would highly recommend coming up with some sort of organizational system that works for you. And once you're in an organization, that works for that organization. So organization, very much an important part of that. And then another one Austin hit on a little bit that I love to use. I use this all the time. If you are fortunate enough to work on a fairly mature application, like Austin said, doing a little bit of editing of HTML and CSS in the actual product, screenshot it, throw it in Photoshop, move it around a little bit. You can generate high fidelity mockups at a ludicrous speed. And people always wonder how you did that so fast. So that's a great tip.
Thank you so much, Mike. And Veethika. Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. I just jumped right past you. Nick, if you would.
No probs. So I always really enjoyed paper and pen, but that's sometimes quite difficult on the web. So one tool that I've been using quite a lot recently is Procreate, which is a weird name, but it's a really good iPad app that you can use with an Apple Pencil. And I tend to screen record that and talk through ideas or problems and mapping stuff out and share that on YouTube so people can provide feedback on that sort of stuff. So that's sort of a way that I use that app to sort of take the role of doing a whiteboard sort of session that you may do face to face with people. And yeah, when it comes to tools and technologies, everything that everyone else said, you can be pretty interchangeable with them once you sort of get the knack for it. But just remembering, like, they're just modalities of communication. So the core of it is understanding what are you trying to achieve for your user and using these to convey that idea in some way or another to help communication with your team. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Nick. And Veethika.
Yeah, so I just want to mention that I had never imagined that I would be relying on a tool like GitLab for when it comes to design, especially. And it's strange that I'm so dependent on this now. And I'm not saying this because I'm an employee of GitLab, of course. But I mean, I have worked with many other issue management tools, even Jira and all of that. But here what we get to do is we get to put our designs in the issue itself, and the conversation is so organized. And all of that happens without leaving the context of the issue, which is, I think, the best. And for everything that we don't do on GitLab, I prefer Figma because, of course, Figma has kind of replaced a bunch of tools from the past. I mean, if I would have had to answer the same question, say 5 years ago, I would have named 3, 4 different tools for mind mapping, for collaboration, for making vector objects, but now it all happens all at one place. So yes, Figma and Loom, of course, Iain talked a lot about that, and it is really very helpful, especially when we are divided by time zones and we are not available for each other all the time. It really makes a huge difference when we record like just 5-minute videos about what we're working on and what our idea is all about. So that has really helped me in my process. And last but not the least, the Bear app. So that's where I take my notes. And a good part about that is when you take notes there, it lets you copy the same notes as markup, markdown, HTML. So that's very helpful. Like you can put it at different platforms without even thinking about reformatting it.
Thank you so much. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of good questions and answers already popping up in the document. Please do put those additional questions in for the panel if you have any. Let's just kind of quickly run through and go over some of these as a group. So Veethika, it looks like the first answer was from you, and the question was, how has your background helped you in your role? Do you mind just kind of touching on what your response was there?
Sure. So, I mean, when I had started my career long back, I started off as a visual designer, and I worked for various agencies, advertising agencies and graphic design agencies. And even though I have not done that in a very long time, it has definitely given me an eye for perfection when I'm creating something visual, and also a sense of composition, which is very important in our work. Apart from that, I have my education background. By education background, I have a degree in game design, and I would say that has totally flipped my mental model, and how I look at things is very different from how someone else would look at things. And I think each one of us has a unique mental model when it comes to processing information and kind of structuring the content. And I think our background very much affects that especially.
Great, thank you so much. Austin, it looks like you've got the next point.
To be honest, I was answering the question farther down the agenda. And are we talking about the how our background helped in our role right now?
Yes, if you would just kind of touch on your response there, please. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I used to work at a really big company, and I used GitLab there. So having that personal usage is definitely helpful. So this is a bit more tailored to my experience of working at GitLab. But my educational background was in business. I have an MBA. I focused in IT. So being able to always talk about value with my product manager has been huge. You can't just get nice designs out the door. You got to have a reason to make them. So that's always been a focus for me. And I think that's made it a little bit easier to get some of my visions created.
Thank you so much. Iain, looks like you've got the next point.
So speaking of education and background, my education was actually in architecture and design theory, which is a little different than product design for sure. But one of the things that happened was it's a very competitive space to try to work in. And so when they are doing design critiques and design reviews, they can be a little harsh. What I learned was through the process of kind of doing it over and over again was how to take feedback, how to correctly ask for feedback, how to gather a lot of responses from something I created without taking it personally. And it changed how I thought about feedback. Suddenly I could be like, the design is fine. I just need to know what you think. And that doesn't reflect on me anymore. Having gone through that really made it so that I can be a transparent and vulnerable designer and really get insights and responses from the people that I work with.
Awesome, thank you so much. Austin, I'm taking it back to you for the second question. Why did you choose to work at GitLab?
Yeah, so as I said, I used GitLab my last job, so I really loved it as a tool. And when I was ready to start looking for new opportunities, I kept GitLab in the back of my mind, they were just hiring designers just at the right time. That's kind of how it works out in some cases. But the biggest factor that attracted me was the all remote. Pre-COVID, that was not a common thing. And my wife works in the emergency department. So her schedule is really weird. And I was looking for more autonomy over my schedule day to day. So like this week, she's off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And it's been awesome to be able to have lunch with her and go on walks in the middle of the day. Those were things that I was otherwise not having.
Thank you so much. Veethika, it looks like you've got the next response.
On which question are we? Sorry.
No problem. This is the why did you choose to work at GitLab?
Oh, so ever since I had joined college for my master's education, I used to follow the Creative Commons and the open source movement very closely. I was a big fan. And I had, since ever, I've been trying to get into organizations that follow similar practices. And I think GitLab is the most open org and transparent organization that I found so far. So here I am.
Wonderful, thank you. So it looks like the next question is, if you're between two junior level candidates, what's something you look for to decide on the final one? And Iain, if you don't mind articulating your response there, please.
So in that situation, I tend to look for two different things. One, I really want to know how comfortable the candidates are communicating, either one-on-one during their interview, and how do they communicate with a broader audience. They're going to have to interact with a lot of people. They're going to have a lot of questions if they're on the more junior side. I would want to know which one's going to be more comfortable there. The second thing I look for is how excited is the candidate to talk to the users. I look for that as just a trait, and it's can completely change how well someone works in an organization when even during the interview, they're like, I want to talk to them right away. That's my first step in everything. So those are the two things I look for.
Thank you so much. Mike, it looks like you agreed with that. Do you want to share anything additional to what you put there?
Yeah, I'll just say passion is, in my opinion, if you are passionate about design, you're a good designer. Whether you have the skills or not yet is irrelevant. Those can be taught. But if you really love this stuff, you'll end up being good at it. So passion is the #1 thing I look for when I'm talking to candidates.
I would agree with that as well.
So either love it or fake it when you're in the interview.
Sorry about that, Mike. That was a great point to add in as well. Veethika, so junior level candidates, what's something you would look for to decide the final one?
So what I have is kind of a like character trait. So some people are not very comfortable when they're corrected or when they're told that they don't know enough. And that's a capability that we should also be looking for. It's very underrated, but I think it's pretty important.
Thank you so much. And Nick, looks like you're typing your response. Do you mind sharing? Sorry to put you on the spot in the middle.
Yeah, sure. There's so much from so many people to learn. And when I'm interviewing junior designers, there's plenty that junior people can teach me. So I often look for interesting traits, skills, things that they could potentially teach me if we were to work together. So that's something I'd look for.
Thank you so much. Austin, you mentioned soft skills will weigh heavier in your mind over the hard skills. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of hit on already, but it's that general notion of, especially if they're a junior designer, I'm not looking to see like, can they create this flashy animation that can transition all these screens together and make it feel like everything's already made for production. I'm more interested in know how are they going to work with my team? How are they communicating the ideas that they have? How do they think through problems? You might run into scenarios where you're doing a whiteboard exercise in an interview, or maybe you're given a case study to take home and present back. It's more all about that presentation and better understanding how you're going to work with people, because that is where you spend 80% of your time. Maybe like 20% of it is actually heads down, like making things, but you spend so much of your time writing words, saying words. And so if you can do that well, then that's what really matters.
Thank you so much. So it looks like the next question is regarding growth. Since the beginning of your careers in the field of UX, how do you feel that you've changed or grown, not only as a designer, but also a professional, possibly even as a person? Austin, it looks like you've also got that next response.
Yeah, sure. So I've moved from being like super intrigued by like visual design, and that might be partly because I work on more enterprise-based applications, even in my last role. productivity is a huge measure. So I'm not trying to convert people to buy things. I'm not trying to make the next Instagram. That is a different scope. I'm not trying to get people to buy things through Shopify. So I've definitely focused more on productivity, which leads to asking questions more around like, why are you trying to achieve this? What are you trying to do? Just trying to truly understand what people are doing, because they ultimately are hiring whatever software I'm making to do a job. If my software can't do that job for them, then it's not helping anything. Professionally, I've just learned how important it is to treat work as a team sport. Always champion your coworkers. If you use one of their ideas, like, give them credit, tell them thank you, either in a written form or verbally. Recognize your peers. That will go so far for you. You don't want to think of this as like a challenge, like you're competing for promotions. I can promise you, if you champion your teammates, it'll be the best thing in the end.
Agree. Thank you so much, Austin. It looks like we've had a couple of folks join, by the way. So in the event that you have recently joined, we are looking at a document that I posted in the Zoom chat, a Google Doc. Feel free to open that up and toss in any questions. Thank you so much, Martian, for putting that in. Feel free to open that up and put in some questions. We still got about 20 minutes left to go through. So Iain, it looks like your response to that question was next, if you'd like to expand on that.
Yes. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in my personal growth being a designer for so long is I have completely relearned how to ask the right question before I try to solve a problem. I am a caregiver by nature. I'm the person that's like, oh, I heard you had a problem. I want to fix it right now. I had to relearn to like take that step back. Similar to Mike's point earlier, I need to understand the problem. I need to ask questions in a way that aren't going to bias the answers, that I'm actually going to get the genuine information I need to make my choices. And that I ended up pulling into my personal life, and that's made me a more effective communicator in my relationships. It's allowed me to solve problems more efficiently. It's amazing when you just take the design process and add it to your personal life, how much better it is to solve big, hard problems.
Thank you so much, Iain. I'd like to also maybe touch on the fact that I think as designers, we've all had to kind of give up that desire to make everything pixel perfect before it goes out, and being able to kind of put out the smallest thing first, even if it's not exactly perfect. You know, you don't want to stall too much by adding in deep polish. Yeah, it doesn't need to be pixel perfect yet. So feel free to look at Iain's additional response there. And I'm going to move us on just for the sake of time. So the next question was, what would you recommend for someone new in the industry to look for or look out for when job hunting? And Mike, it looks like your response was first.
Yeah, so just noting that UX team size will tell you a lot where that organization is in the process. If it's a smaller team size, or if you are the first designer that's being brought in, just know you're getting into a place where you're probably gonna have to build a practice and change that organization's path, which can be a fantastic thing. I'm not saying that you should avoid that. Just know that you're gonna have to dive in. It's gonna be a trial by fire. So be ready for that. But if you're looking for something where you can dip your toe in a little bit more and kind of ease your way into it, then look for an organization that has a larger UX team size, because they more likely will also have a more established process that you can kind of wade your way into.
For better or for worse with that process, whether it's a good one or not a good one,
Yes.
They probably will have a more established process. That's true. Iain, and thank you so much, Mike. Iain, if you would articulate your response.
Yeah, I think the first thing I look for now when I'm looking at a new organization to join is, am I actually interested in the product or the problem space they're trying to solve? When you're a product designer, you spend a lot of time learning about the very nitty-gritty, tiny little details of these flows. And if you try to jump onto a product that doesn't interest you in any way, it's going to be really hard. I find it anyway, very difficult to convince myself to learn about a product I don't care about. So that's like the first thing I look for, and that excitement in the product you're working on will carry through to the way your design feels, the way you communicate about it, and you can be the person that makes your team excited to work on their product.
Thank you so much. So the next question is, what percentage of your day would you say you're stressed on time, rushed to get things done? Do you feel like you're rushed on your design process stages, or usually have the time you need to get the job done well, or done well? It looks like a couple of the responses are pretty similar, that we don't necessarily feel super rushed at GitLab. So I won't make the shorter responses, I won't make you all articulate those just because there may not be much more to say. But Mike, it looks like yours is a little more detailed. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I was thinking back to my pre-GitLab days, because yeah, we do a pretty good job at GitLab of not rushing folks. But oftentimes in organizations, it's phased. So there'll be times when it's just crunch time and it seems insane, and then there'll be other times when there's really not much to do. So just know that a lot of times, the less agile a company is, a lot of folks are still in the waterfall world, and in the waterfall world, it's crunch and then not much to do. So it's often phased out.
Yeah, we used to call it feast or famine, it seems like, with our workflows at jobs in the past. And Nick, you also say not much at GitLab, but you say use fidelity and iteration to manage tight time scales. Do you mind expanding on that just a bit?
Sure. So there's only a finite amount of work that you can do as one person, especially when you have a tight time scale. So if you are trying to accomplish something and there's a limited amount of time, think about what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, and then sacrifice fidelity in order to sort of achieve what you're trying to do in the best way. So if someone says, I need to understand the layout of a page, you don't need to make a pixel perfect page. You could potentially just use wireframe blocks and sort of lay it out in that way. So based on the amount of time that you have, use fidelity to sort of convey what you're trying to do. Lower fidelities if you have a smaller amount of time. And then iteration is really useful here as well, because you can always iterate on top of fidelity. And when you put something out, it means that people can provide feedback. Whereas if you don't put something out, regardless of how great the fidelity is, no one's going to be able to provide feedback on it. So manage fidelity and use iteration to your advantage, and that should help in when you are pressed for time.
Thank you so much, Nick. Veethika, do you want to expand on your comment there?
Sure. I mean, we have no reason to be in that position, because if we are doing communication and iterations right at GitLab, we definitely should never feel the stress. But to me, it happens mostly towards the end of our milestone. Milestone is a 30 days period that we consider as a release cycle. And it could very well be a personal trait, which I've written in the document as well, because as we near the deadline for the milestone, I get really worried about what could go into implementation, the upcoming milestone, what couldn't, and what are the negotiations that I have to make with the team. But this can very well be managed, and I'm working on it. That's all.
Thank you so much. Next question is top 2 things you look for in a junior level person's portfolio, and also common mistakes you see in a portfolio when someone is new. And Austin, it looks like you had the first response there. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, GitLab's a great example of where we really focus on a thing called asynchronous communication. It's like, how do you communicate things when no one else is there to listen to you say them? Your portfolio stands as an asynchronous object. People are looking at it and learning things, and how you communicate those things is what's most important to me. I would say the mistakes I see are people only posting screenshots. Yes, it is great to see that you can make visual aesthetic things that look great, show great understanding of color theory or how human psychology works. But if there's no words that I can understand from that, then it's hard to discern what you did with it. It's okay if you post things to Dribbble. Dribble's great. I use it all the time to look at stuff. But there's a difference between using something to communicate ideas and to show off your visual muscles.
Great point there. Mike, you've got the next response.
Yes, I do. Where is
We are looking
response?
at the we are looking at top 2 things for a junior level person's portfolio and common mistakes.
Oh yeah, just the, I think a lot of times we try to make portfolios that are pretty, which are great. They do catch your eye, absolutely. That is an important thing. But when you're really digging into it, the more you can explain what problem you're trying to solve and why it was designed that way, if you're looking for a UX role, that's really what we're looking for. Pretty gets your attention, but we really want to see like what problem you solved is great. So more text, less pictures. Sounds crazy for a portfolio, but more text, less pictures.
That's an excellent point. Nick, it looks like you have the next response.
It's just reiterating what Mike said in a different way. People who communicate the outputs of a particular project rather than the process and what they went through, and communicating the value that came from whatever it is that they produced. So showing the outputs is great. Showing the beautiful things you can create is great, but also demonstrating the process that you came to those beautiful outputs is more important when judging whether a person is suitable for a company or not.
Thank you so much. Iain, it looks like you're editing your response. Do you want to expand on that at all?
No, what they said was perfect.
Got it. Very good. Thank you so much. So the next question is, when laying out case studies for your portfolio, what is too much and what level of detail is most important? I don't actually see a response to that one at the moment, so I'm going to move us on because we do have a lot of additional questions and only about 10 minutes left. But panelists, if you want to post anything in there, feel free to do that just so everyone can see those responses, and I'll move on to the next question. How can you make the most of your job if you work for a company that is not very design forward and your work isn't what you would want to display in your portfolio? So Austin, that's a great question. Do you mind expanding on your answer?
Yeah, I feel that a lot because one, I came from a company that did not allow me to really post any of my previous work. They told me they had no stake in that being of interest for the company. So I wasn't allowed to show any of that work. But if your company's not designed forward, I get that. I've worked with some really ugly front-end UI elements, and there's nothing I can do to affect that. So that does show up in the way that my designs are because I'm constrained to like what our development team could make. The most important thing I would say is try and communicate the problem that you were solving and how you solve that problem for users, because at the end of the day, people in business want to make money. And if you're making their users more efficient or you're bringing in more revenue, regardless of how the UI looks, that's ultimately what I think they're looking for.
Thank you so much. Mike, it looks like you have the next response to that question.
Yeah, so similar to the, it's hard when it's a portfolio that's out there online and you don't have a chance to speak to it. But it's great when you are in an interview and you're asked to like do a portfolio review. That's a great opportunity to say, this might not be pretty, but here's where the challenge is, and here were the wins that I got against those. And sometimes showing that you can fight against a difficult situation is more impactful than, everybody at Google is successful. That doesn't really tell me a lot, but if you were able to take a bad organization and move it one notch to the right, that shows a lot.
Agree. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. Next question is, how many projects on average do you work on at a time or on a daily basis? And Austin, you've got the first response there.
Yeah, the project question is a difficult one because we don't think about work at GitLab in terms of projects. We really think about it in terms of problems that we're trying to solve. So I'm going to say I try and solve 3 or 4 different problems, maybe at most of the time. That's to like try and minimize the amount of context switching that I'm going through. Each of those are typically rather difficult to try and resolve because GitLab can be a rather integrated and complex application. So you're constantly switching or thinking about the architecture of the entire application and jumping around, it can be difficult to manage that.
Yes, I can definitely agree with that. Thank you so much, Austin. Iain, you've got the next response, and it looks like you're still typing it out. So I don't know if you want to finish that and then speak, or.
No, I don't want to take everyone's time. I could actively work on 2 or 3 design projects at a time. After that, trying to do those 2 designs, the context switching gets so expensive that I spend so much time trying to remember what I was going to do instead of just doing it. That being said, I can manage, I think the most I've ever done is about 15 projects, and those are just 15 things that are going to be worked on or in progress, or if it's an agency, like these are pitches or these are possible things. A lot of them I can keep track of touching on a lot of them, but I can only actively have a couple of projects at a time.
Thank you so much, Iain. Next question is, how long do you typically have to work on one project? Austin, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, or if it was just usually a month or so.
Yeah, again, going back to like problem point for GitLab, I would say we usually get about a month to work on a problem space before it's expected to really be pushed into the build track. There are times where things arise and they're like, okay, we need to really get this from idea to production in a couple weeks, but those are rare unless you're in maybe a more mature area of the product. But generally for me, I see about a month in scope.
Thank you so much. Veethika, you've got a response after that.
Yeah, so it absolutely depends on what kind of feature we are talking about. If it's a really elaborate and end-to-end workflow, something very new that we plan to implement, we try to break it into iterations and plan the implementation across, I mean, as far as 5 to 6 milestones. And I have also added an example supporting that, which you can open and see like how this one big effort has been broken down into many smaller parts. And we plan to just continue to work on this maybe for the next 5, 6 months.
Thank you so much. Some of the questions here have maybe more brief responses, like typical hours in a workday. So I'm going to actually skip those to some of the ones that might have a little bit more complexity in the response, just so we can get as much value out of the last few minutes as possible. I'm going to move on to, what is the most difficult part of your job? Austin, you had the only response there. If anybody else wants to jump in, feel free to do so. But if you would articulate your response.
Yeah, so I'd say like the technical part, at least at GitLab, this isn't normal for everybody, but we have to review code changes that come in. So this is checking out code. So it requires some level of knowledge of Git and understanding how to get that code change locally to build. And sometimes in GitLab, I have to configure things to make it appear. So that can be a bit of a challenge. More administratively, this is maybe more to the design process. I would say gathering evidence is hard. It's easy to like pitch this great idea. And then when they say, where's the evidence that we should make it? It then is like, okay, now I gotta go find metrics. I gotta go conduct some user research. I have to go validate this thing somehow, some way. We do have a backdoor saying like, okay, if we definitely know like we should change this button from blue to red, okay, that's fine. But when we start talking about those bigger ideas, you gotta bring forth the evidence, and that there is no direct answer to how to do that. You have to kind of figure out what works best.
Thank you so much, Austin. By the way, I'm going to put him on the spot just a little bit, but we have, again, one of our UX writers on the call, Martian. So if you have any questions related to that, if you would just post those in the document. And Martian, if you don't mind just kind of keeping an eye out and responding to those, that would be awesome as well. Sorry to put you on the spot here.
No
Thank
worries.
you so much. Iain, it looks like you had the next answer to the difficult part of your job question.
I think the most difficult thing that I've struggled with, especially at GitLab because it's asynchronous, is knowing just how annoying I need to be. Because design is not always everyone's first focus, especially engineers. They have code, product management, they have a lot of talks and customers and sales and all those things. So finding out just the right amount of, okay, everyone, I need you to give me feedback. Okay, I'm still waiting on feedback. That you're getting responses, but no one's frustrated because you're annoying them. It's a very delicate balance.
Thank you so much. And Veethika, it looks like you're maybe just adding to that if you'd like to articulate your response.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Ian's response here. And I would just add to that, that apart from that, you also have to start being comfortable with not being able to please everyone and not being everybody's favorite.
Thank you so much. That is a great point as well. That's definitely something that I have also dealt with in the past. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Let me just quickly skim and see if there's anything else that might be worth. These are all great questions, by the way. Thank you all so much for putting those in. Coming from different industries, how have your strengths, weaknesses, and skills affected your design process? And thank you so much to whoever's going through and marking those in bold. That does make it a little bit easier. Let's actually wrap up with the last question of impact. And Austin, it looks like you have a response to that, but what impact do you feel that you've made on the product?
Oh gosh, I was just starting to write my answer to that one. It's been really cool to work on a public product. Previously, I was working at enterprise where everything was internal. So it's been really fun to see how much excitement there is about GitLab in the community. Sometimes my features have come up like in Reddit threads or on public forums, which is sometimes encouraging or challenging depending on what the feedback is. So in some ways, it's really rewarding to me to see that some of the work that I'm doing is recognized by people in the industry. So I do feel like even though I work on a very focused part of the application, some of it are very used features in the community.
Thank you so much, Austin. We are right at about time. So if you do have any additional questions that you want to address with the panel, feel free to post those into the document, and maybe our panelists would be kind enough to just kind of review those for a couple more minutes and type those in. But I want to say thank you all again to everyone that joined us today. Thank you so much again to the panelists who came in and gave their amazing responses. This was really helpful and really fascinating conversation. This is recorded, so I will share this with everyone once Zoom finishes processing. But if you do have any additional questions, feel free to put those in there. And again, thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.